Okay, hello everyone. My name is Taheripour, an assistant professor at Purdue University. My co-authors on this paper are Thomas Hertel, Badri Narayana from Purdue University, and Shabnam Shahin and Jorge Escura from World Bank. This is a joint research between Purdue University and World Bank, and we are trying to understand the interaction between climate change, water scarcity, and interaction between these items with food security for the Indian economy from now to 2030. As I mentioned, the goal of this research to understand economic and environmental consequences of water scarcity for India. In this particular presentation, we concentrate on consequences of expansion in water demand for cooling thermal power plants if India continues to use wet cooling technologies in future. And also we concentrate on costs and benefits of adopting new dry cooling technologies, including implication for irrigation, land use, and food. Many studies have mentioned that India will face with major water scarcity, and as you can see in the map, in many river basins, India will have a major water scarcity. Different studies have shown that. Many factors will contribute to this water scarcity, and several industries and activities will compete for a scarce, limited amount of water. Among them is electricity production, and in particular, the demand for cooling thermal power plants in India. The top one is showing the projected demand for future water, and the lower graph is showing the expansion in demand for water for cooling thermal power in India. And the left side figure is showing you the expansion in demand by river basin for cooling thermal powers in India. And let's say suppose we are taking that water from irrigated agriculture in India. The right graph is showing that. And as you can see, it has some consequences for the available water for agriculture in India, and that's different across different river basins. So in order to answer the question that we would like to study, meaning that what are the consequences of these water scarcity for food, for example, we are using a computational general equilibrium model, which developed earlier through the support of USDA and US-DOE, and we are using and improve that model in this work. This model is called GTAB BioWater. The major aspects of this model are it traces demand for and supply of a wide range of commodities, including biofuels, primary sources of energy and electricity at the global scale by region, divides crop production into rainfed and irrigated, traces water and land resources and their demand at the river basin and agroecological zones. And in this model, water can move across its alternative uses within a river basin with limited movement across AEZs, agroecological zones. And it takes into account global trade for goods and services. So here I'm concentrating on two experiments. The first experiment is water scarcity leads to reduction in available water for irrigation due to expansion in water demand for electricity production if wet cooling technology is used. The second one actually reduce demand for water for cooling due to adoption of new dry cooling technologies, and we consider different costs for adopting these new technologies. Let me share some of the results that we got from the first experiment. As you can see on the left panel, the impact of using more water for cooling thermal power plants will have a major impact on production of food items. And on the right panel, you see the consequences for net trade, meaning that India needs more to import more commodities, food commodities. And for example, reduction in production of food products will be summed to about $1 billion. And reduction in net export of food product will sum to about $218 million. So, and let me mention that values represented in this work, values represent recurring costs. So their net present value in perpetuity will be much higher than these numbers. In this panel, you can see impact on food prices. Even the total expansion in demand for cooling thermal plant is not great compared to other factors which will drive the scarcity. Still, you will see that it has a major impact on food prices in India. And also, as you can see here in this graph, water scarcity and using water for cooling power plants will increase irrigated area and will decrease irrigated area and will increase rain-fed areas. And in almost all river basins, we will see that will happen in future, and that will end with an expansion in total cropland, meaning more deforestation. Some deforestation in India. And now let's look at two micro impacts. So reduction in water for irrigation due to the expansion in water demand for electricity production reduces India's welfare by about $1 billion and 300 million. $1 billion and $300 million compared to the baseline. And remember, again, this is, if you calculate the net present value, that will be much higher. And you can see the impact on the change in GDP, which will be a reduction in GDP by 0.12%. So in order to avoid these impacts, India can adopt dry cooling technologies. And you can see here, dry cooling technology have the capability to reduce the demand for water significantly. So, however, these technologies are more expensive, and we need more capital to use these new technologies. As you can see here, in this graph, we compare the cost of dry cooling in terms of capital intensity with cost of wet cooling. And as you can see, when the cost is increasing, the net benefit of using dry cooling is going down. Actually, the threshold is about 6%. If the cost of adopting dry cooling technology is higher by 6% compared to the wet cooling, then the cost will be much higher. So in general, the conclusion will be demand for water for cooling thermal power plants will increase significantly in India in future. In the presence of water shortage, expansion in electricity production limits available water for irrigation in some Indian river basins. Reduction in water for irrigation will negatively affect food security in India and increase food imports. Water security extends rain-fed area pressure on natural ecosystem, and dry cooling systems can be used to reduce water demand for thermal power plants. However, dry cooling systems reduce the adverse economic impacts of water scarcity if their capital costs do not exceed the wet cooling system by more than 6%. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Sure. Yes, please.
So you consider the economic cost of wet versus dry cooling as a driver, primary driver of adoption. And here in the U.S., I would say regulatory is a primary driver of adoption of dry cooling. What's the regulatory environment in India? Is it relatively?
Yes, actually, that's really good question. In India, the government has suggested to start using the dry cooling technologies and actually banned expansion in wet cooling in some river basins. And also, as I know, in some river basins, some of the existing plants have been shut down because of the water scarcity. Other questions? Thank you very much.